Hello and welcome to my channel NB Soundhopper UK, and the subject of this video will be my favourite 10 studio albums. This is my first video, so it's only right and proper that I do a brief intro. The logo at the start of the video pretty much explains what the channel is all about, which is for me to crap on about the music that I like. I'll also waffle on about other music related areas, stuff that I enjoy and stuff that annoys me. NB Soundhopper UK, a stupid name, right? Well, it does make some sort of sense. NB are my initials, which stands for Neil Bailey. UK is where I live, Portsmouth to be precise. Soundhopper. I don't devote my listening time to a particular genre or a group of related genres, and I don't favour a specific era, so I think of myself as something of a sound hopper. It's a similar principle to that of a football fan who is a ground hopper. If you don't follow football, then look up ground hopper and I'm sure you'll get the gist of what I'm on about. Before I do my countdown, I'd like to name check some channels which have inspired me to want to do something like this. They are the Sea of Tranquility, the Omaha Introvert, and the Canadian Stud Muffin. I've provided links for them in the description for this video. So if you like channels with people who have a passionate interest in music, I highly recommend them. Now on to the nitty gritty, my favourite 10 studio albums. Number 10, it is Elysium, the third album by goth band Fields of the Nephilim, released in 1990. I wouldn't describe this as a typical goth album in that the song structures come across as being quite prog rock to me. Goth and prog aren't necessarily an obvious combination, but it works really well here. The prog elements show in the elaborate arrangements, and the goth elements provide great drama and atmosphere, which is what you'd expect from a goth album, really. Carl McCoy's vocal style is a bit of an acquired taste, but down the years the same can be said for many of rock's distinctive vocalists. For example, Captain Beefheart, John Anderson of Yes, Geddy Lee of Rush. Overall, though, a thoroughly enjoyable, dramatic album. Number 9, this time by electronic duo Fuck Buttons with their 2013 release, Slow Focus. From the brutally thumping rhythm of opening track Brain Freeze to the almost euphoric final track Hidden Excess, this is an album containing 52 minutes of relentless, exhilarating energy. What I particularly like is the way walls of sound are built up and then gradually each layer taken away. There's no better example of this than on the track Stalker, which wouldn't have been out of place on the soundtrack to a John Carpenter film. In fact, the whole album has a very cinematic feel. Number 8. This is more familiar territory for baby boomers. It's Pink Floyd's 1977 album, Animals. In truth, it's probably more famous for its cover than it is the music, but I think it's Pink Floyd's most solid album. Perhaps the last album where the band members were all on the same page as each other. Just great contributions from David Gilmour and Richard Wright. Lyrically, Roger Waters at his most caustic without disappearing up his own arse. Alas, that would come later, but in the case of Animals, I can't recall a time when I ever went off this album. Number 7, more prog. This time, Relaya by Yes, which came out in 1974. Following the ambitious but flawed Tales from Topographic Oceans and the departure of Rick Wakeman, I guess a lot of Yes fans at the time wouldn't have been too optimistic about the chances of this matching the highs of, say, Fragile or Close to the Edge. For me, it's even better, and Patrick Moraz proved to be an excellent replacement for Wakeman. It's dominated by the 22-minute Gates of Delirium, which takes up the whole of side 1. Epic track with some great transitions as it evolves, and John Anderson provides a lyric that doesn't wander into the impenetrable, which had happened several times in the past and since. Despite the scale of Gates of Delirium, though, Side 2's Sound Chaser and To Be Over are by no means overshadowed. Number 6, Pentamerous Metamorphosis by Global Communication. Originally released as a bonus disc that came with the 1993 album Blood Music by shoegaze band Chapter House, Pentamerous Metamorphosis is an ambient electronic retranslation of Blood Music and is now regarded as a classic of the genre. Justifiably so, in my opinion. The retranslation is such that working out which elements are derived from the Chapter House album becomes a bit of a challenge. Just over an hour of great melodies and lush synth soundscapes, it's a real gem. Number 5, another electronic album, and one which is a little bit out of left field really. I'm not aware of too much ever being written about this album or even people who own it. It's Episode 1 by Cop Show, their sole album released in 2002. The group and album name describe what this album is all about. It's the music for Episode 1 of an imaginary cop show in a very British vein. I think more shoestring than the Sweeney though. It's down-tempo and ambient for the most part, but does contain some up-tempo tracks as well. There are parts which are clearly meant as a homage to Roy Budd's soundtrack for the original Get Carter film. The tracks with vocals are used as a way to narrate the imaginary show's storyline. Every aspect of this album is extremely well done, and listening to it is an hour that absolutely flies by. Number 4, more electronic, this time with a darker twist. Dead Cities, the 1996 album by Future Sound of London, or FSOL for short. The cover gives an excellent idea of the kind of dystopian soundscape they were aiming for, and they certainly succeeded. I remember at the time FSOL didn't regard themselves as musicians as such, and this is an album which is more constructed than played in the conventional sense. In other words, this has a very technological approach to how music can be produced, an unfamiliar approach in the mid-1990s, but one which is now commonplace. The tracks mostly flow into one another, and there's a huge amount of variety in the styles and tempos used, but it all hangs together brilliantly. Fantastic use of samples from both film and music. If I had to pick a standout track, it would be Yahe, a real psychedelic electronic belter. Number 3, some post-punk in the shape of Sleep No More, the 1981 album by the Comsat Angels. Very prominent use of bass guitar, as is typical of a lot of post-punk. What makes the band stand out for me though is simply their great songwriting. The lyrical themes aren't exactly full of the joys of life, as much of it touches on things like the fragility of human relationships and the madness that is American politics. Some things never change. It's skillfully done and doesn't descend into self-pity. Apparently the drums were recorded being played right next to a lift shaft. This gives them an immense and distinctive sound. A lot of the credit there must go to producer Peter Wilson, whose idea that was. Number 2, Yankee UXO by Canadian post-rock band Godspeed You Black Emperor, which was released in 2002. To me, this album highlights all that is great about post-rock. Slowly developing instrumentals with epic crescendos, ambient interludes, and the occasional drone thrown in for good measure. Much more varied instrumentation than is normally found in rock music, a wide range of musical reference points, including minimalism, jazz, classical, krautrock, amongst others. To some extent, this is what prog rock could have evolved into. With this album, you get some of the complexity of prog rock without overemphasizing virtuosity, which can get a bit tedious after a while with some bands. The emphasis is all on the music and not on the egos of the people performing it. A long album, nearly 75 minutes, but it's a gripping listen. Number 1, Geo Gaddy by Boards of Canada is my number 1 studio album. Another selection from 2002 by coincidence. Boards of Canada are something of an enigma to me in the way that their music is constructed. At the same time, they managed to make tracks seem both nostalgic and futuristic, or light and dark, or uplifting and melancholic. It gives them such a unique sound and feel, that's despite the numerous performers who have come in their wake and aimed for something similar. So on this album you get the slightly wonky synths that make it sound like you're listening to a cassette tape which has been exposed to heat for too long. There's loads of backwards masking and indistinct voices from either the band or from films. There's been plenty published on the web about this album and its themes relating to the earth, Satanism, complex maths. A lot of this is apparent from both the track titles and what the indistinct voices I refer to are actually saying. All these various theories about what this album is about over time just adds to its mystique. It's an absolutely superb album. And there you have it, my favourite 10 studio albums. Not necessarily quite so obvious a set of choices as you might find from a baby boomer, I guess. But whether you liked or hated this video, if you could give it a thumb up or down or leave a comment, it would be greatly appreciated as it may help me develop things a bit for future videos. So if you've made it this far, thank you for watching.